Oh, Mozart in the morning. Who doesn't love Mozart? Oh my good word. Well, wake up, Cerberus. Wake up. Come on, folks. That's right. It's been a while, but we're back here. I've returned from around the world traveling. It's all work related. There was no fun involved whatsoever. Ignore the Instagram photos. Ignore all the Facebook photos and just focus here because it was work. Hi, I'm your host, Gregory Junkbond Carpenter, with the super awesome and mysteriously brilliant Suzanne Sherman in the hinterlands of Utah. Behind the deck, Mr. Jeff Johnson. Oh, producer, my producer. And how is everyone out there today? We're doing fine here. We've got a great show lined up for you today. We are going to be talking about some very interesting topics. And why am I not going to tell you about it? Because Suzanne has to come in and give you the housekeeping rules. The lovely Suzanne Sherman.
Well, good morning, my long lost friend. I have missed you. I've missed doing this show with you guys terribly. So I'm delighted to have you back. You had a wonderful time. No. You were working. You had a horrible time. Thank you.
I was working. I had no fun. It's like that line. If you ever see the movie Team America: World Police, and the woman says, I just can't make love to you, not unless you tell me you'd never die. And the guy goes, I will never die.
There are definitely times when men will promise anything.
Exactly. And it's true. I mean, he's a puppet. He'll never die, so.
Okay, well, there's that. Truth be told, I did not see that movie, so I was just...
You're lucky.
Add it to your playlist. You gotta watch that.
Oh, with blinders. And,
that one an idiocracy. Hey, here we are. We're on movie. Welcome to Waking Up Cerberus, folks. We're talking movies today.
Actually, we are going to discuss one. I saw The Great Hack over the weekend, and I thought with Junk Bond back, we would get into that a little bit later. I also want to share some of my insights with regards to the shooting in Gilroy, because I used to live in Santa Clara County, and I'll get into what I had to go through to attempt to get a concealed carry weapons permit over there. But before we get started, I want to remind you can follow us on Facebook, Cerberus Radio Network, Cerberus. That's with a C, Cerberus. I'm kind of laughing because when we changed the name of the station, we kept having to write it down, Cerberus, Cerebus, and I know Daniel.
Cerebellus.
Yeah, but Cerberus, ladies and gentlemen, Cerberus, CRN is our fan page. We have a YouTube channel, Cerberus Radio Network, SoundCloud as well. Please subscribe to YouTube. If you're watching live, we have a live chat going on, so you can contribute, share your thoughts, and we will relate them on the air. You can also follow me on Facebook, Suzanne Sherman's The Wasatch Report. And we have a SoundCloud page. If you are not able to listen live, you can download those. So please follow. If you like what you're hearing, give us a share. We're trying to upgrade our equipment also. So if you go to my website, SuzanneCSherman.com, my articles are all there. My blogs, I just published one yesterday that's getting a tremendous amount of attention. There's a donate button. Imagine this. If all of our listeners donated $2, $5 a month, something like that, we could get the ability to take phone calls and upgrade our equipment. That would just be outstanding, and keep this content rolling for you. We also have a Radio Coast streaming link, and that's going 24/7. Jeff Johnson goes through tremendous efforts to plan the programming, make sure it's kept up current. So Jeff, on behalf of all of us here, I want to thank you for the efforts that you do behind the scenes. You take a lot of time out of your day to get this done. If you click on that Radio Co link, you can hear The Spy Who Loves Liberty. Jeff, make sure that we have a Junk Bonds show up there. Liberty Minutes, Greg, those are awesome. The Wasatch Report, Waking Up Cerberus. Mike Meharry has shared his files with us, so he's from the 10th Amendment Center. Great stuff with him. Also, Shift Gold, he does. Justin Spears has a new podcast coming out. He filled in for me last week. So there is some outstanding content. I have to laugh because I see on social media people are griping about the stuff they hear on Fox. And I just wonder, why do you listen to that? Not only is our network available, but we've got some great podcasting out there. The unsung heroes that are effectively being deranked, demonetized by the tech giants. They don't like what we have to say. Alan Mosley, the gold standard. We've just got some great stuff out there. So give these folks a listen. Again, SuzanneCSherman.com. If you go there, you can see all of my articles. I've got another one coming out from the 10th Amendment Center with regards to the reinstatement of the federal death penalty Robert Barr announced the other day. And I addressed that, shared my concerns. Again, my blogs are on there. There's a social media bar. If you go there, one-stop shopping. We've got the YouTube link and the SoundCloud. Oh, and guys, I'm going to I'm going to put the radio stream up there. I figured out there's a RSS feed option. So we'll be doing that. That being said, Junk Bond, where do you want to start?
Suzanne, I just want to jump in here for a second, too. For all our listeners out there's got to be someone out there that's a budding podcaster. You know what? I have 24 hours a day to fill on Radio Co. If you're a budding podcaster, email me your podcast and we'll try to fit it in. If you think you can do it, if you think you have the voice and the aptitude for some live radio, send me a message. I got some hours free that I can put live radio in too. So, hey, if you think you got what it takes to be on Cerberus Radio Network, let us know. Always looking to fill some new spots.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people with a lot of things to say that, this is one of the blessings of the options we have with the social media. And as much as we dislike the tech giants, they're responsible for putting the three of us together. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, it's all their fault.
It's all their fault. I wanted to share some of my thoughts about the let's do a couple of announcements. Like I said, I have a blog coming out. It's actually on my site right now about the Gilroy shooting. And I drew a connection there with the Supreme Court and Heller. We'll be getting into that. And anybody in the Utah area, the Indian relay races are going to be held at the Weber State Fair at Golden Spike State Park. If you haven't been to those, they are amazing. Have you guys ever seen these?
Wait, now, so hold on. So you have runners, they get together and they hand off an Indian to each other?
They do horseback riding. So they race up, they jump bareback, race around, jump off, and hop on another one. It is a really cool it's a really cool event. And I was going to go to the one in Sheridan. I think it was in May. And the weather was so bad, I wasn't going to get on the roads and get up there. And in fact, I think they actually canceled it and rescheduled.
How many do they have? How many do they do?
There's actually a series and they travel around. There's going to be Washington. It's going, you can go to the Indian Relay. If you Google Indian Relay, you'll see it. It's the Sioux Nation and they put this on and they just do a circuit and they're coming this way. They're also going to be, I believe, in Idaho and Washington. And I forgot the other places, Montana, South Dakota. So if you're in any of those areas, do check them out. I absolutely cannot wait to see this.
That actually sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, I think so.
How long have they been doing this now?
The actual relay races, I'm not sure. I don't know. I look forward to going and learning some more about this.
Huh. Well, you got to give us a report when you get back, because it actually, I mean, I started out with a joke, but I mean, it actually sounds pretty interesting and kind of cool. It's kind of what they used to do back in the Iroquois used to do back in the East Coast when they would play lacrosse. They would play from town to town, and they would go from town to town, which could be, miles away. So a lacrosse field wasn't a standard lacrosse field. It was just this huge thing that they would work back and forth over the course of days in order to finish the game. It was actually extremely interesting how it was originally played.
Yeah. Oh, also, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say but another thing just lost to history.
Yeah, a lot of it is, speaking of history, when I started doing some radio shows, I would talk about my travels, and I had spent some time traveling through the Blackfeet Nation up in Montana. When I talked about the squalor in which these people are living, one of my followers just excoriated me. He was absolutely livid for me bringing this up, but I actually am going to be talking about this more. I'll do it either on my show or this one, whatever the opportunity, presents itself. But I want to
What
draw
was the issue?
what?
What was the issue?
The issue was he just felt that it was no longer an issue. We had paid them; they have their reservations. I've been speaking to a friend of mine, as some people know, the movie series, which is actually a tremendous hit, Yellowstone with Kevin Costner.
Mhm.
Part of that in the first season was filmed at my house, and I got a chance to become acquainted with and very good friends with one of the cast members, the Thomas Rainwaters. That my house was supposed to be his house in the series, and his driver Mo. And I've been talking to Mo about the Indian reservations and a lot of the myths about them. We think that these reservations are set aside as exclusively for their use, but I'm learning that's really not the case. So we've been in discussions about putting a show together and talking about that, as well as the issues with the horses on BLM land and how we can preserve those.
Mm.
So there's some interesting stuff, lots and lots of issues there that we'll be getting into. Also on Friday, I'll be interviewing Adam Kokesh. So that's going to be interesting. I saw an interview with him with one of my friends doing a debate, Daryl Kane, and just the comparison of the two. Kane was taking the position that it's going to be the responsibility of the general government to fix all of society's problems, get us back to the Christian morality, and Adam was of the mindset that not only is that none of our business, but he wants to get rid of the feds entirely. So it's going to be a fun interview. I'm looking forward to that. And if you have any questions you want me to ask him, anybody out there, send them to me and I will present them. I'm getting some sent in already, so that's going to
So a
be
little difference of opinion there.
a little a little bit. I
Hey,
think I might even play it. I have the YouTube link up. I'm going to listen to
well,
it
that
again.
would be good. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
I'll
would
put
be cool.
it on there so you can see it. But do you really think, ladies and gentlemen, it's the proper role of the government to restore morality? The government's destroyed morality pretty much. And do we really think that we're going to and what is moral? What is morality? What is their business? I'm reading some reports about Kamala Harris. As you know, she was a former prosecutor in the
Mm.
state of California. And she would actually joke. I'm going to put up an article here. We'll maybe get into it later. How she had no problem putting people in jail if their kids miss school, violating truancy laws.
Right. Right.
So this woman, I think she's dangerous. I think she stands. I know people think Trump's going to win by a landslide. I think she stands a good chance in the 2020 elections, quite honestly, and I find that terrifying.
I never count anybody out because you never know how it's going to go. Especially, October surprise type of a concept. Those types of things are happening more often. They're not waiting till October anymore either for these surprises. They pop them out and they test the surprises
Mhm.
earlier in the election cycle, so you can see what happens later on when you're looking for a reflex, a conditioned response type of a thing, like a Pavlovian type of response, and you're going to see more of that as we become more informationalized. And talking about informationalized, I'd like to really talk about uh, the great hack that you had seen, because I thought that this was interesting. I have not seen this documentary yet, but I heard that it does take a little bit. It was the Cambridge uh, hack that they looked at, right, in this
Yeah,
movie, in
Cambridge,
this documentary.
yeah, and just backing up the truck really quickly, not writing anybody out. I remember there was a day when I first heard of a junior legislator from, I think it was Illinois, named Obama. What a crazy name that is. Who is this
Mm,
guy? Why do I need to pay attention to him? I don't. He's never going to amount to anything. So there you go. Don't write anybody out. But yeah,
mm.
the great hack. uh, the information could have been, it could have been a very great movie to illustrate the tremendous undue influence Google has. And you don't need to have seen the movie to comment on this, Junk Bond, because you are very much aware of how Google can skew results and searches. I don't use them, I use DuckDuckGo. But we are really, the information we get is divvied out as Google sees fit. And the funny thing is, rather than illuminating this and the influence the tech giants have and propagandizing the information that's available, is it really turned into just a grievance session, complaining that because of Cambridge Analytica, Donald Trump won, Brexit won. So it was really just a gripe section for the progressives about the role in decentralizing government. I think the tech giants thought that they had this locked up, but somebody took advantage. It used it to their advantage, and these people are complaining about it. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. It's kind of data as a commodity, right?
Well,
It's a big right. It's big business owning and managing your life and your lifestyle based on what they have and what they can exploit and what they can use for their own purposes. It's kind of an interesting approach to it, but I think there's merit in reviewing this and looking at this from an adult perspective. Don't complain about everything. Let's look at what happened and let's see how it happened and why it happened and what we need to do to keep it from happening again. Now, that being said, I don't know that we have, I would say, the institutional interest in locking out hackers and keeping them from hacking things because that would force different organizations to put a lot of effort uh, into identifying that there are problems. Does that make sense?
yeah, absolutely.
Nobody wants to complain that there's a problem. Nobody wants to say there's a problem with what they have. They all want to be, you know, like how police are kind of sovereign citizens. They're a little bit above the law, right? How many cops have ever pulled over another cop for speeding when they're on the job? Count them on one hand. That's how many you're going to see. So these people are in the same way, uh, just as sovereign from the rest of you and I would call it, that they are above us. That nothing. They're what was the thing about Ronald Reagan? Teflon. That was it. Teflon man. Nothing could harm Reagan. Well, these guys are the same way. Nothing's going to harm them. They're insulated. The laws have been built and put in place to protect them from people like us or from other companies that could challenge them. And therefore, there are certain vulnerabilities built into what they're doing. And you can only, if you put security in too many places or put it in certain places, it's going to highlight the illegal activity that you're doing. There, I said it. Okay. How's that? Does that make sense? That should be like black and white. If you start to highlight where you're scamming people because you put extra security in there to hide it, then everybody's going to know you're scamming them up front. Better to get caught on the back end and beg forgiveness.
Well, it's interesting. I've seen a lot of posts about people that are upset about Google, the big techs, and all this stuff, and they want government to get involved. And I keep saying, no, we want the market to do this. We don't want government to get involved in this because government's created this monster all by itself now. The government is the problem. So if we have the free market response, because you and I were talking about this the other day, you were interested in maybe developing a program. I said, well, do it because people might go to it. You might actually make a bunch of money by creating a new platform because people are tired of Google and all these others. Well, that's how we're going to do it. But what happens? Government protects Google and keeps you from entering the market.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But you know what? There's nothing that says that I can't make the program. And there's nothing that says that I can't use it. All the protocols are in place. Um, as George Bush would say, the interweb to communicate interglobally is there, and it's all in place, right? So all I have to do is upload my program. Boom, load the program on your computer, and we can talk together with Suzanne just perfectly, no problem at all. It's just a basic sharing protocol that has to be put together exclusively for us. Now, the problem comes in if you try to license it, if you try to sell it to other people, if you offer it up as freeware or what's called shareware, then you have to pay a fee in some instances. Other places you can offer it up for free and you can only put out a certain number before it has to be licensed. even as freeware because it has to be regulated by the feds. So even if you're offering up a free product, you still have to have it covered with registration and license, so the feds can manage it. I think it's a losing situation. It's a losing situation for anybody. So much for freedom. That doesn't work like that's not how it's supposed to work. If I come up with a product, I should be able to market that product without having the government tell me I can't do it. It blows my mind.
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or the press. And here we are.
Oh wait, that's the old version, Suzanne. Yes,
Oh,
yes, they're supposed to do that now all the time.
Well, it is the old version, and you raise a really good point. This is the problem, and I go about this all the time with calling these rights specified in the Bill of Rights, these pre-existing rights, constitutional rights. Because then, as we see all the time, the politicians, the black robe messiahs come up and say, what? Rights are subject to reasonable regulation.
Right.
You can't
right.
yell wolf, as Nancy Pelosi says, in a crowded theater, as the court actually said, was you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Commercial speech is not protected by the First Amendment. Slander's not protected by the First Amendment, but apparently it is if you're a newspaper being sued by the family of a young boy harassed by a hard leftist Native American who did nothing more than smirk back at him. Actually, he smiled. It wasn't even a smirk. He was trying to be polite. I would have punched the guy in the face for getting that close to me and touching me. So here we have this kid who's excoriated in the media. The parents rightfully sued, and now the Supreme Court says this is protected speech. What this really, or not the Supreme Court, but the federal court said this is protected speech. None of this is protected. It's a restriction. The general government cannot regulate, make any laws in this area whatsoever. And I talk about that in my blog about the Gilroy shooting. This is the problem. What happens is when the Black Robe Messiahs in Heller decreed that the Second Amendment, what does the Second Amendment mean? Well, it means that you can have a handgun inside the home. Well, that's not at all what it means. It means it's none of your damn business, you guys. This is up to the states. And notwithstanding Heller, California's gun laws are going to be awful anyway, but they actually relied on Heller. For instance, when I tried to apply for a handgun. So let's wrap up the cyber stuff, and then we'll get into Gilroy a little bit more. But I think, or not Gilroy, but we'll get into Gilroy after that. But there was also a massive data security breach. While we're on this topic of data, let's get into that a little bit. How vulnerable are we really? There was a data breach by a gal, I think in Washington, it had Capital One, affecting more than 100 million customers. This is an article out of USA Today. They said personal information, including Social Security, bank account numbers, and more than 100 million individuals were compromised. Gee, here's the other thing. When I was practicing law in California, they actually used to prosecute individuals from a certain part of the world for having stolen Social Security numbers. Now they're not doing that. They're not doing that now.
That's because it's part of the noise now.
The IRS is encouraging it because that way more tax returns are filled out. And if you're somebody unlucky enough to have had your Social Security number used to file a tax return, now you can't file your own taxes. And if you don't file your own taxes, guess what? You're going to be subject to interest, to penalties. They'll actually shoot you. If they try to take your home and you say, no, you can't do this, you're dead. Paige Thompson.
They're coming to get you. That's
right. She's a former software engineer. You can't trust those guys. Is accused of stealing data from Capital One credit card applications. And this has been said it's one of the top 10 largest data breaches ever. The FBI arrested her for theft, which occurred between March 12th and July 17th, the records show. And they collected, again, from a company cloud-based server where Social Security and bank numbers are stored. Junk Bond, how secure are cloud-based servers supposed to be, and what's the reality?
My first question for you is, what's in your wallet?
Yeah, not much, apparently.
I know what's in my wallet, your credit card.
Mm-hmm.
That's what she's saying. They're not secure. That's about as simple and as easy as I can get it. What is the cloud? I saw a cartoon the other day. Little kid's out there with his dad staring up at the sky and said, "Dad, what are clouds made of?" And the dad turns to him and says, "Well, mostly Linux-based servers, son." And that's the reality. They're mostly Linux-based servers, which are fine. Don't get me wrong, but it it's somebody else's computer, and that's what the cloud is. It's somebody else's computer. That's all. Don't make more of it than it is because it's nothing more than that. You've decided that you trust somebody else's computer more than you trust your computer to store your information. This is what you've been sold on. This is what you've been told is a good idea. Just let that sink in for a minute now. You believe it's good to put your stuff on somebody else's system and trust the fact that their security is going to be sufficient to protect your interests. My question is number one is, do they know what your interests are? Do they specifically know what your needs are? Odds are no. You basically have given up everything by the time you go to a cloud-based service. You're allowing them to have your stuff compromised. You're kind of like an enabler. I guess that would be the way I'd put it the best, I think. You're an enabler, Suzanne.
Oh, well. So what do we do?
Well, I would say, like I tell all my customers, the same thing. You can get yourself a storage device at the house. You can get one that's 4 petabytes for $80. 4 petabytes is just a little bit bigger than what Bill Gates said we would ever need, if you remember back a few years ago. Uh, we have to decide what's necessary to keep. You don't need to keep all of the videos of the fuzzy bunnies that are running around. This stuff is not what we would consider mandatory. You have to decide what's important to keep: documents, legal documents, and if it's really that important, print a copy of it. If you don't already have it, print the doggone thing. Put it in your safe. I have a safe in my house. It's a 400-pound safe. You're not going to move that without a horse. Sorry, it's not going to happen. So the old-fashioned security stuff works best. Get a hard drive that's an external hard drive to your computer. Make a backup of it. Have it on a different hard drive or something like that. You just plug them in, just USB plug-ins. Very simple. And what do you do with that? You encrypt it. That's the important part. Just encrypt it. Take this thing that people probably, it's obscure now, but you might have one around the house. It's called a pencil. And we used to use these things and write. So you write down that password on a piece of paper inside your purse or your wallet or something, and keep that with you. And that's your decryption key. That will lock and secure your stuff. If somebody breaks into your computer, they can't get to your external drives. If somebody has ransomware that they launch on your computer, wipe the computer. What the heck? Just wipe it. You shouldn't have anything on there that's important. Let me say that again. You shouldn't have anything on there that's important. If you're going into the interweb and you're using anything other than a virtual computer to go touch the interweb, then you're doing it wrong. Set up VirtualBox. Go to virtualbox.com. Load a computer, load an operating system on top of your computer. So if somebody comes back and touches your stuff, they're just in the virtual machine. They're not hurting your computer. They're not going to damage you. They can't reach you. They can't touch you. All these security problems that we see are from people that don't understand or have never been exposed to how correctly to set up their security posture. That's where the problem is. These guys at Capital One, sorry, they had an insider. And they obviously were tracking her for a long time because the FBI arrested her immediately. She was using the AWS, the Amazon Web Services. And again, there's a lot of data up there, a lot of data. Um, they, and here's the thing that I find very interesting is that the FBI could have stopped her a long time ago before a lot of that data was compromised. And that would be interesting to see why and how long, or why it took so long for them to actually step in and intercede and, you know, change what the heck was going on with her pumping out all that information. I don't know why she was allowed to compromise so much before they actually went in and cuffed her. I don't understand that.
My supposition is that they wanted to bolster the case to show that she actually committed a crime so they could avoid some of the pre-crime arguments. She didn't really do anything so far. It was just she was planning to, and I think it was probably an acceptable it was acceptable to them to have 100 million users get their security compromised so they could have a stronger case. Again, that's just my supposition. If you are somebody that works with Capital One and you think that your information may have been compromised, there is a website, www.capitalone.com/facts 2019. Interestingly, you also mentioned Amazon. I got a email or in my inbox one day that said, we have successfully changed your password on Amazon due to your request. And I thought, what? So now I couldn't get into Amazon at all. And they actually have a customer service number that they will answer for Amazon. And I have to say, they were able to fix my account immediately. But this virtualbox.com, I have to say, I have never heard about it. So I would really like to see what I could do to harden up my security here as well.
Yeah, most people don't. I mean, they don't work in the business like that, so they're not aware of the resources that are available that are out there for security purposes, right? And that's understandable. Nothing against you folks, believe me. You folks are a lot of folks out here that are listening are just learning about these types of resources that are available now. This is the first time they heard of some of this stuff. So maybe we do a show. And we walk through and we show everyone how to set up a virtual box. Would you like to do that one day, Suzanne?
I think that would be fantastic. This is the stuff we do here at Cerberus Radio Network. Everybody. By the way, I want to give a shout out to our friends in Missouri, in Owensville, Missouri Liberty Radio. I want to thank them for syndicating our network. I know they're playing the Wasatch Report, and I've given them permission to bring in our other shows as well. So I want to. That's a big feather in our cap. We're delighted to have people taking notice here, guys. Thank
you for the love. Holy cow!
Yeah.
It's good to feel love sometimes.
Yes.
I feel so happy.
I urge people to try. What, Jeff?
I just get demerits. I don't get no love.
Well, and deservedly so.
That's because you're not loved. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, you want us to spell it out like that for you.
You certainly aren't on the Ready Men group right now.
I'll be back. I'm sure I'm persona non grata now.
Oh my gosh. Well, we'll get into that a little bit. Hey, do you guys mind if we change over and talk about the Gilroy incident here, the Gilroy shooting?
No, please go right ahead. You're running the show there, lady.
I wrote an article yesterday. I just knocked out a blog real quick because when I lived in California and I attempted to get a concealed carry permit, I really started getting into wanting to learn about firearms probably in 2009. And I found a school in California. It wasn't far from my house. And I figured I just wanted to learn something about guns. I knew nothing about them. I'm not mechanical. I figured it's a start. And it turned out to be a concealed carry class for the state of Utah. And if you could get the Utah permit, then you would have a concealed carry permit in 30 other states. Well, I never pursued getting it because I figured I'm never even going to go to Utah. Why bother? Well, I couldn't carry in California because there was no reciprocity. with California. But if I ever went to Utah, I could always go to these other states. So here we are. I just decided, well, I want to be able to carry in California. So I took the concealed carry course. I went through all this. Lo and behold, I found out that Sheriff Lori Smith, hardcore progressive in California, and it's, that's redundant. But I called, and her little minion assistant said, we have a policy. We're not issuing any. At the time, I think they were waiting for a Ninth Circuit Court opinion to weigh in on clearly a 10th Amendment issue. But what was disturbing was he very condescendingly informed me that you have a right to have a gun in your home, but nowhere else, because that's what the Supreme Court said. Well, what case was he referring to?
Heller.
Well, yeah.
I get a cookie.
He didn't come out and say it, but go ahead, Jeff.
He said he gets a cookie. I said I get a demerit.
Well, yeah. You're the producer. You're not the co-host. Call
the shop steward and file a grievance. So let's back up. So I find out now that we have, on the 28th, 2 days ago, 19-year-old male open crowd, and it turned out the guy now is half Iranian. Again, I'm not blaming race or anything on any of that, but it turned out his family was kind of strange. But anyway, he opened fire at the crowd at the Gilroy Garlic Festival. Now this is held at Christmas Hill Park. I'm waiting for them to change the name of that if they haven't done so already. But this is a place I frequented regularly with my boys when they were growing up. And I'll tell you this, I never went to the Gilroy Garlic Festival. It was always hot as can be during that time. And I just don't like crowds, and I just never felt comfortable going to this.
Well, it is garlic. I mean, it should be hot.
Yeah, right. The chief of police, Scott Smithy, had said there were many, many officers in the park at the time, and he credited his department for a quick response time. Now, you have to understand, there are no weapons of any kind allowed in the parks. This is a county ordinance. And if you go to my blog on SuzanneCSherman.com, you'll see this, the Garlic Festival, and the link to SCOTUS. The mayor was completely unaware that gun-free zones are target-rich environments. He said in a press conference, "I want to express my extreme shock and sadness about what happened today." Can you imagine, you guys, a shooting in a gun-free zone? Oh my goodness.
I saw a comment from our good friend Andrew Avery. He said, if you ever notice, mass shootings don't happen on a shooting range.
No, you don't see that.
Yeah, for good reason, right? People out there know what they're doing. They have safety officers in place. The people that are responsible for what they're doing know what they're doing. The people that are not responsible for what they're doing, per se, or don't take responsibility for what they're doing, let me put it like that, are the ones that cause the problems. But yet everybody else's responsibility to turn in their guns because of the poor and horrid behavior of these other people.
Well, the mayor called for thoughts and prayers. And as I said here, thoughts and prayers, I'm a huge believer in prayers. But if you don't...
Is that a political policy or political statement?
What he's saying, yeah.
Thoughts and prayers?
Thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers are with the family.
That's how we're going to work this out, folks. Thoughts and prayers.
So absent serious reconsideration of their policies, thoughts and prayers are absolutely unhelpful. So as I said, I lived in Santa Clara most of my life. And my experience, again, when I called the sheriff's office, they said, well, you have a right to one in your home, but not outside your home. And in Heller, as we alluded to earlier, Antonin Scalia decided to take 63 pages to explain what the Second Amendment means. Antonin Scalia had a brilliant bit of writing there. It was very eloquent, but he was flat out wrong.
Suzanne, you're a lawyer. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
If you wanted to explain what the Second Amendment meant, I mean, where would you start with something like that? Because that seems like a lot of research would be necessary. Personally, as a researcher, I would look for like the source documents and see what the original author said. So,
Well,
but obviously he didn't do that here. So where
lawyer,
did he get his information?
law school. That's the problem. I have to,
Even read the preamble to the Bill of Rights, because you really don't even need to go very far to figure it out. Just go to what the framers and of the Constitution and those that framed the amendments told us it meant.
Jeff, you're really getting on my nerves. You know why? You keep bringing up this preamble to the Bill of Rights, right? And I'd like for you to read it one day. Okay. Do you think you? I mean, do you think you can accomplish that, sir? As a producer, you need to produce something for us to see to work with here. I'm not sure that everyone out there has read this preamble thing to the Bill of Rights that you speak of.
I'll tell
I'm
you
sure
what.
they've heard of it.
In my entire undergrad at UCLA, I studied political science. My field of concentration was public law, and I went into law school. At no time was the preamble to the Bill of Rights ever even mentioned. So you don't hear about it. They hide the football. And backing up a little bit, let's address this. I wrote an article at the actually behest of none other than Don Livingston himself about my experience in law school. And this is called The Problem with Lawyers in the Constitution. And the Abbeville Institute published this. And this is the problem. Lawyers are not taught about the stuff that you guys mentioned, the ratification debates, the preamble to the Bill of Rights. What we are taught is something called case law. Case law is not constitutional history. It is not the proper intention and purpose of the Constitution. It is the opinions of progressive judges, particularly the progressive era and the 1930s, a judicial coup d'etat. I think Kevin Gutzman calls it in his book, The Politically Incorrect Guide to the Constitution. And here's the thing. There's a big difference between case law and constitutional history with regards to what sort of government was consented to. And this is the problem. Case law comes about, again, from the New Deal era. We had Gitlow in 1925, Gitlow versus New York, which was responsible for incorporating the Bill of Rights against the states. And now this becomes something that we're taught in school from elementary school on. I remember learning about the three branches of government. And then we had the constitutional amendments. The 10th Amendment was the police powers amendment. And that gives an impression in your mind that, well, law enforcement is what the states can do on their own, absent the feds. We're taught supremacy clause. Anything the feds come up with is the supreme law of the land. Nothing could be further from the truth. Then we come up with, we're taught the 14th Amendment. Well, what's the 14th Amendment do? That applied the Bill of Rights to the states. And isn't that wonderful? All these rights that the Constitution gives you, the states have to follow. I mentioned something in a group called Student of the Gun, that the Bill of Rights was never intended to apply to the states, and that there was an issue. So there was, I think it was a pro Second Amendment video that was posted. And this guy's talking about a federal case coming out of California about their assault ban. I mean, there was so much wrong on this, their assault weapons ban. And I said, well, according to the Constitution as ratified, California can do this. Oh, excuse me, Suzanne. When the states created the Constitution, they surrendered their right to do anything in this regard. The Constitution applies to everybody. I mean, this is just a bunch of people still clinging to their middle school civics books. This is what we're taught, and we're never taught.
No. Hold on. I got to correct you. They're clinging to their middle school social studies books. We haven't been taught civics many years in this here union. We've been taught social studies based on German school socialist concepts. Okay, let's get back to legal stuff.
So this is the problem. We are taught that the Bill of Rights is miraculously now applied to the states through the 14th Amendment. We call this the incorporation doctrine, but we're never taught that this is not what it was supposed to do. And this is the creation of of a usurpation of state sovereignty by none other than judicial fiat. It is tantamount to an Article 5 convention, and the states were never invited to weigh in on this. And I'm not picking on the people in this group. This is par for any of these gun rights groups. They refuse to admit. And why? Why would they want to defer state gun laws and have the federal judiciary or Congress decide what our gun rights are when we've seen more and more restrictions? Look at the Trump administration, good and bad. It has never been more difficult to purchase a firearm now with the ATF rules that they have. Medical marijuana, if you're a medical marijuana user, ATF form 4473. If you're using it legally, according to them, you can't have a gun. Why? Because the Second Amendment only protects the right to have a handgun in your home. It says nothing about what kind of medications you might be using. Therefore, we can do this. Assault weapons banned, Massachusetts. Why? What case law did they cite? Heller. ARs aren't protected by the Second Amendment. This is what happens when you say these are rights and not restrictions against the general government. And again, this is what happens when lawyers themselves don't understand the Constitution. They become legislatures. They become judges who interpret the Constitution. Then we have people that take the oath to uphold the Constitution and military and law enforcement who don't understand it either. So getting back to Heller, once again, what did he say? Scalia is referred to as a textualist. He relied on the plain words of the Constitution when determining what it meant. His conclusions, however, reveal, again, as we just mentioned, the inherent problem with his method. He failed to take into consideration the ratification debates and the understanding of the constitutional agreement at the time. He ignored the question, what type of government did the states and the people consent to? What type of government? They consented to a limited general government with the powers specifically delegated, enumerated. They were few and defined, as Madison said in Federalist 45. Those delegated to Congress set forth in Article 1, Section 8. Everything else remained with the state. Guys, how hard is this to understand?
It's hard if you've been indoctrinated, which is why it's so important to get to the kids. That's why we have to have a village to raise the kids. We have to do it for the children all the time. It's a standard manipulation technique used by adults throughout the ages to indoctrinate children. The Nazis did it very famously, and it was done here in the States. Remember, we started. What happened during the New Deal? You mentioned the New Deal before. We had the work camps for the kids. We put them in there. We sent them. I saw a video the other day. It was the Bowery Boys. If you remember them from old time television, they were happily going out to one of the Department of Agriculture work sites to go work to support the I forget which of the New Deal laws it was, but they were happy to go out and do it. Why? Because they had been indoctrinated into thinking this is the way we solve the problem. Not to mention that the Depression of 1920 was much worse than the quote Great Depression. And how did that work? Well, we got ourselves out of it naturally. We didn't have government intervene, and the economic cycle corrected itself. And it didn't correct itself. It just adjusted and went through the normal gyrations it needed to. And we were back on track. You intercede with government, and you get an extended 20-year depression. So the kids are the key. The kids are the ones that can either go forward and bring us out of this cycle, or the ones that are going to force us to stay in this cycle. Right now, from what I see, I don't have a good, strong feeling that a lot of younger people today actually understand what it means to be a socialist. it has been woven into the everyday concept of how they live their lives. They don't understand. They don't see that. You go back to the what was it, the 1928 socialist platform for the Socialist Party for the presidential election, and everything in the socialist platform has been adopted mostly by the Democrats, some by the Republicans, and have been implemented. It was one of the candidates. I think Jeff had put it up one time. One of the socialist candidates said, "I don't need to run anymore. The Democrats are doing what we want. Why should I need? Why do I need to run for president?"
Well, and
It was already being implemented.
kids that they can depend on the government to solve their problems. There was something out by the
Well,
Tide.
if the kids were taught that the government is parent,
Yes.
then they don't have to look to their parents, and they can be disrespectful, and you go down that road too.
Yeah, and if you get punished, you might end up in juvenile dependency court, and your parents could lose custody. But going back to, again, the Gilroy Garlic Festival, the shooter here was able to fire 30 rounds into a panicked crowd. Now, imagine if they had concealed carry holders there, and that was the norm in California. This could have been nipped in the bud right away. It took police 1 minute to get there. They're grandstanding and say how quick the response time was. And in fairness, 1 minute's pretty good, but they were probably all over the place. 1 minute is an eternity. If somebody has a gun pointed at you or they are shooting and you are unarmed. Now, just for clarity, if there was a shooter out there and I could get away, I'm not going to try and be a hero. You might miss. If you have a full metal jacket round and that passes through and hits somebody else, every round you send has a lawyer, has a prosecutor, has the media, and has the politicians attached to it. If I'm in a situation where somebody comes into a public place and directly threatens me or mine, then it's game on. I remember going into a coffee shop in Park City, and as I've said numerous times, I open carry for reasons I'd rather not, but I'm not going to get a permit. So open carry is my option. And a gentleman looked at me and asked if I was law enforcement, and I said no, and this is legal in Utah. I was very polite. I used to give the snarky comments, but I realized it's more important actually to be a goodwill ambassador. And he just said, well, if an active shooter comes in, I'll just let you take care of it. And I said, unless he directly threatens me, you're on your own. These people think, they don't like the fact that we have guns unless they think that they can hide behind us. And by the way, what kind of a man lets a woman defend him? Come on. So 30 rounds this guy fired. The police are patting themselves on the back for a job well done. Completely ignored is the fact that California's draconian gun laws. Now, look at the crime rates in California. They're getting worse and worse. In fact, that was a huge reason why we left. And at the same time, the sanctuary cities, the homeless, they scaling back on criminal prosecutions, some of which I agree with, but be that as it may, we're seeing a tremendous increase in crime in California. At the same time, they are marching forward to disarm their citizenry. Again, that's what the California voters seem to want because they keep putting these people in office. Let California do what they're going to do. Don't get the Supreme Court into it. Don't run to the federal judiciary over their stupid laws. Let them have it and then go somewhere else. If you keep running to the Supreme Court, we're going to have laws all over the place like California. That was the point of the article Carl Jones and I wrote on national reciprocity and how that's a Trojan horse. It's just going to ensnare a lot of law-abiding citizens because now the Supreme Court, and this is something else we hear in law school when we're reading the syllabus for the cases we're studying. Again, we study case law, never even discuss the ratification conventions. Due to inconsistent state opinions, this case is ripe for review. Inconsistent state opinions is the heart and soul of our system of government. But we forget about that. The national system, which was rejected outright in the Philadelphia Convention, never even made it to the ratification conventions, is what we have now. It's been a judicial coup d'etat. Nobody cares about the Constitution. Yet, we have Republicans saying all we need to do is get back to the Constitution, and they don't even know what that means. Tell me what that means. Well, we got to secure the border.
Well, if you get back to the thing that caused the problem in the first place, you're just going to start the problem all over again. You're not going to get anywhere. How long did it take to give up the states' rights for what would I'm thinking of? I know what I'm thinking of. Who was it? Cohen versus Virginia? I think
it's before that, the first administration. Jeff, you can run with that, the Whiskey Rebellion.
Well, no. I'm thinking a little differently. I think it was Cohen versus or Virginia versus Cohen, something like that. The Supreme Court asserted that it had the power to review state Supreme Court decisions.
I don't remember all of them off the top of my head. Yeah.
Well, I might have earned myself a cookie.
Yeah.
Holy cow. So yeah, it was like 1820-ish or so.
Yeah.
Cohen's. Okay. Okay. Not close for a layman, let me tell you. Close for a layman. So yeah, that's when the Supreme Court, it was a martial court too. They said, you know what? This was before the horrendous Barron versus Baltimore, which is another one of my favorites. But they said that they had the absolute right to review any state Supreme Court decision, in that the state Supreme Courts could make a mistake, or they were in when it came to human rights or individuals' rights, natural rights, something like that. And I found it very ridiculous, considering, I mean, that was what, like 45 years after the Constitution was written. They all of a sudden decided, okay, boom, we're going to put a nail in the coffin there. And then we had Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896. And well, did they make a mistake there? Unfortunately, no. They interpreted the Constitution right there, and then they turned it around with Brown versus the Board of Education in Topeka, Kansas, 1856, where
we wanted our policy outcomes to hell with the Constitution.
Right. We completely reversed the decision, which was a proper decision, for, because we're a kinder, gentler place now. We have to make people, understand and believe in the morality of the government, as opposed to doing what the law says, or what's the limitations in the Constitution that are in place in the first place. So they can correct a state, they call it correct a state law's decision because of their inconsistency, but in their own inconsistency, they're flawless.
And the distinction, which really is without practical effect, is that in Philadelphia, a congressional negative or a veto of state laws was rejected. So what was rejected, they're still getting the same outcome. It's just coming from the judiciary instead, but it has the same intention, which is to completely invert the system and put the federal judiciary completely supreme over the state legislatures, and that circumvents the will of the people and consent of the governed, which is something some folks a while back went to war to achieve. And we've gone back to parliamentary sovereignty, which was what we were living under, excuse me, in England. So again, this is something people need to pay more attention to. It's just a given that we have top-down legislation from the federal government. Now we've got the Democratic, I guess the debates, those are coming up, the DNC party, and we're going to fight for who's going to hold our leash for the next 4 years. And let's just see what happens. But as long as, again, the Republican conservatives, we're going to get back to the Constitution. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, we have to secure our borders. Well, you can't constitutionally. But again, that's the post-1861 Lincolnian, Hamiltonian America. Just say we got to be practical, to hell with the Constitution, and secure this United States of America. So until we figure out what we're doing, we're never going to allow ourselves to come up with some real solutions, which is decentralization. So that also is constitutional. Anyway, we're about out of time. Junk Bond, Greg Carpenter, Jeff Johnson. On behalf of all of us here at the Cerberus Radio Network, I want to thank you for listening. I'm Suzanne Sherman. God bless you. Have a great day.